get things rolling ahead of a big divisional matchup for your Indianapolis Colts on the road against the Houston Texans. A lovely bookcase that you have there. I'm hanging out. I've got my elf on the shelf alongside Reggie over here. So I'm in good company. I'm not
Oh,
doing this alone.
I know all about the elf on the shelf. The elf on the shelf is the greatest manipulator of all time when it comes to the month of December and a toddler and a 3-month-old or a 3-year-old. I think the elf in the shelf at our house today was in the fridge, Larra. I don't know how he got in the fridge.
Oh my, we was hungry, clearly.
Well, I think we're like 5 days in and we're already having to resort to putting him in the fridge. So we'll see
he goes in the fridge, Mate. He goes in there in search of things. Does your elf on the shelf have a name?
I think we just call him Buddy.
Okay.
I know you're listen, I'm learning as I go here all the different rules for Elf on the Shelf. I know you're supposed to give him a specific name, but we copped out a little bit and just went with Buddy the Elf. But Buddy the Elf he's going to have to come through this year. It's a big year, as we all know. It's a big year for Buddy.
It is a big year for Buddy, and it's a big year as our boss, head coach Frank Reich, ushers in a new year. It is his birthday today. It's a little feel-good Friday. Happy birthday to Coach Reich. It's been fun to see his daughter Leah put out on social media a video of him with his granddaughter that's super cute and everything that you would expect in terms of celebrating Coach Reich. And another bit of feel-good news, we got the update from Rigo Sanchez that his surgery to remove that cancerous tumor was successful. So he's beginning those steps in his recovery. So excited to hear that progress and more encouraging updates from Rigo, keeping him and his wife Cynthia certainly in our thoughts and prayers through their journey. Now, a couple of updates from the injury activation standpoint, Mate, on this Friday. Jonathan Taylor activated. That was earlier in the week off that COVID-19 list. And then just today, DeForest Buckner as well.
That's huge. Plus you throw in Jonathan Taylor too. So you got one guy on offense, a key guy on offense, and then two really important guys on defense. I mean, it goes without saying, Danico Autry has missed the last 2 games. He's the Colts' leading sacker. He has 6 on the season. So that's going to be great. Prior to him going on that list, he had a sack in 3 straight games. So the consistency was there. And then as far as DeForest Buckner, again, like it's so obvious, Larra, when he's not out there. That's just it's not a slide on anybody else. It's just a compliment to how good he is and what a big impact he makes.
Well, there's a reason you give up the 13th overall pick for a guy like that, right?
Without question. And, the NFL put out a stat the other day that with DeForest Buckner, when he's physically on the field, when he's actually in the game, Buckner and the Colts on defense, they give up around 3 yards per carry. When he's not in the game, including last Sunday when he missed that game against the Titans, the Colts give up over 5 yards per carry. I mean, that's a huge difference. 2 yards per carry doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. That is a ton. And so, yeah, as you said, that's why the Colts gave up a lot. They gave up a first-round draft pick in the middle of the first round to go get a guy that's a bona fide 3-tech defensive tackle, one of the best players at his position. And so when he's not out there, you definitely notice it. And it's going to be great to get him back in this game. The Texans, I guess the big picture on this game as far as the running game is concerned, the Texans are not even in the same stratosphere of the Titans when it comes to running the ball. They've only been over 100 yards in 3 games this season. They are, however, getting running back David Johnson back this week, so that helps. But Duke Johnson, CJ Prosise, David Johnson, these guys are not Derrick Henry. So the Colts are motivated. I know that game last week.
Like there is no other Derrick Henry. So, yeah,
for
not
sure.
even a knock on the Texans. That's just he is in a completely different universe pretty much
for sure
than everyone else, aside from maybe Dalvin Cook in the league right now.
Yeah, I think even that's a stretch, and that's how good Derrick Henry is. But no, I guess to wrap up the point here is, the Texans, they're a good team. They're an improving team, but they rely more heavily on the pass than they do the rush. And I know the Colts are still smarting after that loss against Tennessee last time out, where they're trying to use that as fuel and motivation with 5 games to go, and it's pretty much playoff football from here on out.
When you mention those numbers with DeForest Buckner on the field versus off the field, that's one of the really impressive things when he came over to Indianapolis was purely his availability, the very few games that he'd missed in his NFL career. So when
only one game, only one.
Exactly. When you look at his production, it's equally as impressive that he's stayed as healthy as he can for the physicality that he brings at that position, the size that he has. So that's truly a big number, I think, that a lot of people, I don't think, give enough to, is just purely how reliable DeForest Buckner is based on being healthy season in, season out, and missing so very few games. So you have the production, you also have the availability. That's an incredible 1-2 punch in the favor of DeForest Buckner. So submit your questions here. We'll be debating them, discussing them for the next 10 minutes or so to get you guys ready on this Blue Friday ahead of that big divisional matchup. The Colts will, of course, play the Texans in Houston this weekend. Then they'll go again, back-to-back road games. They'll be at Las Vegas, come home back to face the Texans another time. So twice in a stretch of 3 weeks. What a wild schedule we've had, where you talk about facing Tennessee twice in a matter of 3 weeks, which was really about 17 days because of the Thursday to Sunday turnaround. Then you have the Texans twice in 3 weeks. But with the Jags, you don't face them until week 17. So you bookend your season, week 1 and week 17 against Jacksonville. So just as is 2020, right? That's exactly how things are going right now. So a question from Lance. When can we expect to see the combination of Kemoko Turay, Autry, Buckner, and Houston on the D-line as a unit? Of course, Kemoko Turay has just been back for 2 games since he was activated from that just devastating ankle injury that he suffered in 2019, more than a year removed from the game. So they've been very conservative, very selective on working him back in, not rushing him in too quickly on that D-line.
Yeah, I think it all depends on situational football. I think it all depends on Kemoko as he continues to get back up to speed. I mean, we're talking about a guy that missed over 13 months, almost 14 months of football with that gruesome injury that he had to have surgery on. What was it? A fractured ankle in a couple of different spots. I mean, that's just not something that you can just all of a sudden come back from, flip a switch and all of a sudden you're good to go and you're the same player. You're the exact same guy in year number 3. Also, too, I think, he's only played in 14 combined snaps in the last 2 games since coming back off of the PUP list. But Al-Quadin Muhammad's pretty good, too. And he deserves playing time. And he's gotten a lot of playing time. I think he's over 50% snaps in 8 games this season. So you like what you have with the rotation of Houston, as the listener commented on. You like what you have with Muhammad, Houston, Autry, and Buckner. I mean, that's a good little rotation. Plus, you throw in Tyquan Lewis and Grover Stewart. The defensive line, for the most part this season, has been a strength, and it's been because of the rotation and the productivity you've gotten from a lot of different guys. So if you do get Kemoko Turay up to speed, where he's able to maybe get you in the last 5 games, I don't know, maybe a sack or 2, that's just gravy on your mashed potatoes. That's how I look at it.
Isn't this potentially the perfect opportunity to start working him in when you know you're going to need all of your weapons up front and containing Deshaun Watson?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, listen, you don't want to oversimplify the game, but Deshaun Watson in that passing game for Houston, it's prolific. As I said, they don't run the ball very well, but they're 3rd in the NFL in passing. What else stands out about them is that they're 2nd in explosive plays over 20 yards. They have 46 passing plays over 20, and they're really honed in here lately. I mean, Deshaun Watson is, in the last 6 games, over 70% completion percentage, over 1,700 yards. He's not turning the football over. He hasn't turned it over since week 5 with an interception. So he's making really good decisions. And if you just watch them on tape, their offensive line is good. It's not great, but they give him enough time to scan. And then he's kind of like Aaron Rodgers back there in the sense that he dances, he shuffles well, he has really good pocket awareness where he can extend plays. And then in the past, he's been able to hook up, for deep connections down the field with DeAndre Hopkins, who's no longer there, Will Fuller, who's no longer there, Brandon Cooks is still there. He's kind of like I guess he falls into that number 1 wide receiver mode now. They have Kiki QT. He's number 2. And then with injuries to Randall Cobb and they let go of Kenny Stills last week, I guess they have a rookie, Isaiah Coulter, out of Rhode Island, who hasn't played all season. I guess he's their number 3 guy. So they're really decimated as far as wide receivers go. That's going to be kind of a fascinating thing going into this game to see if the Colts can take advantage of that. But yes, going back full circle, the pass rush is going to be key against Deshaun Watson, because the more time he has back there to kind of improvise and do all those things I talked about, the deadlier he is, especially when he has a full arsenal of deep threat wide receivers to throw the ball to.
Donnie asks, Matt, what should be the Colts' overall strategy to beat the Texans? I'm going to say score more points.
That's one.
Bold strategy, Cotton.
That's one. Two is, I think for most of the season, you could probably argue that for the Colts, the pass has set up the run, whereas last year, obviously, the run set up the pass. I think in this game, it's going to be interesting to see if the Colts go back to being a run-oriented team first and foremost and sort of, dare the Texans to stop the run before they turn to that passing arsenal, because the Texans are woeful on the ground. They give up over 150 yards rushing per game. They've allowed multiple games over 200 yards this season. The thing about the Texans, as a whole, they're not great, but they still have really good individual parts. Linebacker Zach Cunningham leads the NFL in tackles with over 100. Vernon Hargraves in the back end is a pretty good corner. Justin Reed's a really good safety in his third year out of Stanford. And then, of course, J.J. Watt is still, in my opinion, J.J. Watt. I mean, he still impacts the game. You're
always going to account for him, right?
You always have to know where number 99 is, because it's the sacks, the pressures, the passes defensed. We saw on Thanksgiving, he tipped a pass to himself and then turned it into a touchdown. So he's still, that cliche game wrecker that you always have to account for. But that being said, I would love it for the Colts in this game to run the ball down their throats, especially with the return of Jonathan Taylor, especially with, the hunger level that we heard from with Quentin Nelson earlier this week. I would love to see the Colts run for, $130, $140, go over 400 yards, but do it primarily moving the football on the ground and really kind of get back to that trademark ground game that we were, hoping this whole season would be under Frank Reich and Nick Sirianni.
You mentioned Quentin Nelson. One of the things I asked Q about, I also asked Nyheim Hines about it this week, was where they've seen the most growth from Jonathan Taylor since he was thrust into that starting role when Marlon Mack went down with the injury. And they both said that they both touched on and pointed to the improvement with his patience. That's really where he's starting to gain ground. That's something that he's spent a lot of time in terms of film study, watching, improving in practice. So certainly looking to see if some of that pays off, in particular with the opportunities that they have over this last stretch of the season. He's certainly going to be hungry after having to miss last week as well. So it'll be a good game to certainly get JT going, rotate that ball around between JT, Nyheim, and Jordan Wilkins. Andrew asks, how do you think the playoff picture looks for us with the remainder of our schedule? We got 1 month to go, right?
Well, it's a crowded AFC field. I know 7 teams make the playoffs this year, Larry, as compared to 6 in years past. That's different this year. So if the playoffs started today, right here, right now, the Colts would be in as that 7th and final seed, that last wild card team.
Stop the count.
I thought we weren't going to get political on this show. All right. We had one rule. We don't talk politics. But absolutely. These last 5 games are imperative. The Colts got a little bit of help with the Ravens losing on Wednesday afternoon football, which is incredibly weird to say. So the Ravens are now 6-5. I think they are the 8th seed in the AFC. So I think the teams in front of them, the Colts, that is, you got Miami right there. You've got Cleveland right there. And that's a big loss for the Colts. That head-to-head loss against the Browns is going to hurt them as far as the tiebreaker stock is concerned. So you got 5 to go. Obviously, this is a big game coming up on Sunday. The Raiders are in the mix for a playoff spot. And then I think the biggest test after this upcoming weekend is going to be the Steelers, who continue to just, roll. They always find a way to win. They're 11-0 for the first time in franchise history. So that might be a little bit of a interesting dynamic. It's tough to forecast right now, Larra, but that's in week 16. That might be one of those games where, the Steelers might have some things wrapped up and they might be resting guys. They might be resting some starters because they have home field wrapped up or a playoff seed secured. We just don't know as of yet, but that still looks like a very tough game. So Tennessee has an interesting matchup coming up on Sunday with Cleveland. They still have to play the Packers. So they have some tough matchups left to go in the regular season. So it's still not out of the question that the Colts can come back and win the division. The only difference here now is they don't control their own destiny as far as winning the AFC South is concerned. They need some help. But first things first, if you don't win, nothing after that matters.
And all that starts on Sunday. You get a win over Houston, you put that Tennessee loss behind you, and you take that first step. One of the things that I talked to Naheem about was the very strong statement, and I mean that in a positive way. Darius Leonard wasn't calling anyone out, but he was very candid after the loss to Tennessee last Sunday. And he said, I'm not a quitter. We aren't quitters. This is where you find out what type of team that you have. And I asked Naheem just how that's resonated with the team, what the reaction has been, the response in practice this week to hearing that from one of your captains, especially a guy like Darius Leonard, who has the ability to inject the juice into everybody, put guys on his back and carry them, show them the way to this final stretch of the season. Naheem said, all we have to do is make sure that one bad loss doesn't turn into two bad losses. And I was like, I just felt like that was so fitting. It was like, not to water it down at all or, to minimize that loss to Tennessee, but that's truly all you got to do, right? You put yourself back in a good position, starting with the win on Sunday against the Houston Texans down there in Houston. So we will be on the call. You can join us on the Bell Tire Radio Network beginning at noon. Myself, Matt Taylor. We'll also have Rick Venturi with us and Casey Valier. So wrapping things up, it's a little throwback Friday.
I love your hat, Friday. By the way.
Thank you. I found this in my basement. I asked my husband, I said, where did you get this? He said, I didn't even know I had this. So it's super vintage, old school. I think that this might be like 80s era Colts here. So, repping vintage strong on a Friday, fresh out of my basement, because that's what we're all doing when we have time at home right now is, doing that winter cleaning and finding stuff that you never knew existed in the depths of your home. So, hey, can't wait to get to the stadium to call the game with you on Sunday. Thanks for all of your great questions on this fantastic Friday. Mayte, have a great day. Go move that elf on the shelf.
I appreciate it. I need all the help I can get. So any suggestions on where to hide the elf, I'm all for it. Really, for sure.